Hello, everyone. Today, we're going to talk a little bit about accessibility and interaction, and we're going to talk about that in a world beyond screens. So I want to tell you a little bit about who I am, especially as it relates to what we're going to be talking about today. I am the Director of Engineering for Google Play Apps, Apps Growth and Engagement based in Atlanta. So my teams really help our partners, our developers, build businesses and grow their businesses and scale on Play. I was also previously the XR Eng lead for Firefox Reality when I worked at Mozilla and worked with their Firefox Reality suite of products. So really understanding how you can bring some of these emerging technologies to the consumer space, and also how you can make sure that you are building in an open way and that you are building in a very accessible, inclusive way. Previously, before joining Mozilla, I had my own consultancy, Asir Studios, where I was the founder building emerging technology prototypes. So the goal here, I had left academia for a time where I was doing a lot of cutting edge mixed reality work, and moved into kind of the corporate space, and I missed it. I missed the kind of building something from nothing. I missed the space where you're building things that people haven't seen before. There's not a lot of documentation. There's not a lot of guidelines on how to do some of the things that we were doing, and I missed that. And so I created this business specifically to help companies understand how to build prototypes, how to prepare their teams for building emerging technologies. And so that was a good bit of the work, but honestly, the bread and butter of that consultancy was mobile and web development, and occasionally I got to do some really cool emerging technology projects around IoT, around mixed reality, and around machine learning. And then, as I mentioned, I started my career in academia, where I delved really deeply into 3D interaction and XR research. And the reason for that was I've always been fascinated with this intersection between, emerging technologies, these new technologies that we're all going to have to figure out how to use, how to fit into our daily lives, but also how we interact with those technologies and how we interact with each other, and how do those emerging changes in those technologies change how we interact. And so today I'm going to be talking a little bit about how all of these changes, how all of these interaction changes specifically have kind of migrated and evolved over time, but also what are the opportunities that this opens up for us. So the challenge here is, how do we build for everyone? How do we build with accessibility as a foundation to what we're doing? Recognizing the new possibilities that these emerging technologies bring to us, things that, just a few years ago were impossible for us. And then how do we think about accessibility as it relates to interaction? How do we think about accessibility as that basis for our interaction design? Then let's talk about some of these emerging patterns, from the command line to GUIs to more organic interfaces. And then what are some of the tools that we can use to build for that future, so that we're building for the near future with Android? And then I want to talk about, what does this allow us? What does this enable us to do? At Google, we have a product inclusion North Star that compels us to build for everyone. We work with communities to understand different usability needs from start to finish. Product inclusion can't be condensed into a list of checkboxes. We have to understand the unique needs, preferences, challenges our users face at various stages of the development process, and hold our product teams accountable to address these needs. Being intentional during the ideation, UX research, and design, implementation, user testing, and marketing is key to successful, inclusive outcomes. We build for equitable user experiences, not just minimum usability. and we hold ourselves accountable through testing and best practices. Approximately 1.3 billion people have a significant disability. That's 1 in 6 people, or 16% of the population globally. What does it mean to fully include them in our product journeys? Have you ever experienced an app that almost feels tailor-made to you and how you move in the world? Anybody had that experience? A few folks. How do we make that a wider experience? And how do we make sure that we are including as many people in that experience? Accessibility is about removing barriers that allow users to engage and participate in everyday activities, including reducing the barriers to digital and physical interactions that people have every day. By raising awareness of the key obstacles to information access and tackling these obstacles at the source, we can make great progress in developing a fluid, streamlined information landscape where information is truly accessible to all. So now that we've talked a little bit about the challenge around this, let's talk about what do the emerging technologies we're going to talk about today, things like mixed reality, things like AI, things like brain-computer interfaces, things like IoT and connected devices. What are the opportunities that these open up for us? And so I want you to think about the ways that someone with mobility issues would want to use mixed reality and how we can make sure that that experience is just as engaging for someone who may not be able to walk around a room or a open space. And so thinking about your interface from not just the perspective of someone is going to navigate through the different corners of the space, but also kind of a sitting position. And what does your interface do when that user is sitting? What if that user can only move their heads? What does that change? And how are they able to engage? There are also so many virtual reality and augmented reality applications that are helping people who might have learning disabilities, who might have mental conditions, things like dementia, things like Alzheimer's, helping them navigate the world. So there's actually a study where users who are suffering from dementia or Alzheimer's are placed in a room where we have 3D models of things that are familiar to them, things from their past. And this helps them connect with the world around them in the present, so that the conversations that they're having after these sessions with their loved ones are conversations where they remember who they are, because their memories were jogged because of the experiences that they had in these virtual spaces. You can also think about someone with mobility issues needing the independence that connected devices in your home can give you. Being able to say, if you do have those mobility issues, being able to have a voice interface where you can order and request your groceries be sent to your home, be delivered right to your home, and not have to deal with the challenges that arise because of your mobility issues. You were able to completely move beyond that barrier because of what is allowed to you as a voice interface with connected devices. If you think about brain-computer interfaces, or BCIs, and so these are interfaces that through various means might connect to your brain impulses. And if you think about folks who are maybe mute, who are maybe not able to speak, and the isolation that they likely feel around them by not being able to communicate, by not being able to navigate the world in the same way that we do. And there's a study where a user was able to, just with a brain-computer interface, communicate directly with a monitor that displayed the words that she was trying to say, so that she was, for the first time in years, able to communicate directly with her family and with her doctors in the room. So there's so many things, so many opportunities that these emerging technologies are opening up for us. And so understanding the interaction and the intersection between these will help us build for everyone going forward. And so I want you to think about the relationship between accessibility and interaction patterns. So thinking of each interaction as the building block of your user interface, of your user experience, and thinking at each step, at each micro interaction, how are you making this more accessible for your users? How are you thinking of folks who might not be able to see the screen and might need a higher contrast? How are you thinking about people who maybe are not able to use a mouse, and so they would need other devices to help them navigate a screen? How about people who aren't able, because of other disabilities, to use a voice interface? So how do we think about each one of those interactions in terms of accessibility and in terms of inviting everyone to be a part of our experience and widening the market for any of the products that we might build? And now I want to talk a little bit about how these interaction patterns have evolved and what are the new interaction patterns that are evolving. So if we think of the earliest interfaces, CLIs, command line interfaces, were very static, somewhat disconnected and abstract. Trying to understand a system in a CLI can be very different than understanding it visually, understanding it in a more natural, organic way. It was very directed. You had very clear commands, and still do, very clear commands that you can give it. And if you vary at all or stray away from those commands, then it does not execute. And you have to recall all of those commands. You have to be in a position to either see those commands listed, have a cheat sheet, or have them all in your brain. And we kind of make this transition to GUIs, where we now have an interface that is responsive to us, that is somewhat indirect. We can have compound actions that we're doing. We can kind of explore what is available to us visually. And then there's a lot of recognition in what we're doing. There's, icons that help us understand purpose for a particular action. And then we want to move to something that is more natural, something that is very contextual and is much more intuitive for users. And so the example I like to use for this is, I'm an artist in my spare time. And for many years, I was looking for something that was digital that matched the experience, the very natural experience of drawing, whether it was with pencil or charcoal. And it wasn't really until I started working with the iPad and with some of the apps there that had different texture brushes and different pressure points that allowed me to have a very similar experience to what I was used to drawing and painting outside of a digital experience. Everything before that point for me, there was a learning curve because it was very different than the typical experience you might have with paintbrushes, with pencils, with charcoal. But now, with a lot of these new emerging technologies, we see this move to an organic user interface, and something that is much more fluid, something that kind of anticipates what we're going to be doing, especially if you think of something that is AI enabled, something that is more like a BCI. You're really thinking of something that anticipates your next action and works with you to accomplish actions. And so there's this interaction model, SMAG, which describes how a lot of these patterns actually, these building blocks actually come to be. And so speech is probably the most natural of any of these patterns for those with that ability. And so let's think about this process of, processing speech, bringing it in and acting on something that has been spoken. You'll say something to maybe one of your connected home devices. Hey, watch, say something funny. And this initiates an audio stream that is captured by that device. You next go through a process where you're trying to understand what was actually said. And so you'll have a natural language understanding process where you're trying to understand the different tokens and what they might mean and what is their sentiment. Then you'll want to have something that is a little bit more personalized, that can come up with the appropriate engagement and kind of use context and memory and knowledge and what the system understands about you to respond, so that you're actually having a conversation. And the vision for your system will determine how you put these components together. I do want to say that voice is best used in environments that are not going to be very noisy, right? So if you're in your home and there are limited folks in your home, then that's a great environment to use voice. You also don't want to use voice in environments where error can be very costly or very expensive, because this whole process of understanding what is being said and kind of coming up, synthesizing a response based on that, synthesizing an action based on that, can be somewhat faulty. And if this is a process that requires, high accuracy, you might want to use a different method. And so another method that you can use that will give you the accuracy is manipulation. So using touch for any of your interactions. And so there's discrete touch, there's continuous touch, there's deformation, there's all kind of haptic feedback. These interactions tend to work really well if you're in a mixed reality environment with different controllers that will allow you the accuracy necessary to interact with that environment. And then we have gestures, which are even more natural, more along the lines of that organic user interface. So we have hand gestures that can be detected, usually in a computer vision enabled environment, something like AR or VR. Eye movement, facial movement. There are actual systems that understand what a user is trying to say based on facial expression and eye movement. And then there's body movement, kind of understanding the position of your body in a particular action that you want to carry out. And then what needs to be added here is the capacity for brain-computer interfaces. So thought as a gesture, thought and brain impulses that can be tracked by sensors to determine what a user may want to do in the system. And so we talked a little bit about some of the interaction patterns that we're seeing arise and emerge with some of these newer technologies. But what are some tools that we can use to build for this future? How many folks have used MediaPipe? So MediaPipe is a tool that is offered from Android that works well with TensorFlow and builds in machine learning capabilities for a lot of your applications. So this is going to be helpful if you're trying to build that voice-based system that we were just looking at. If you're trying to build computer vision into your applications. If you're trying to understand how to build a generative conversation-based application with Android, MediaPipe is going to be a great place to start. Another offering from Android, especially if you're building mixed reality applications, especially augmented reality applications, is AR Core. So take note of that if you're interested in building mixed reality applications. If you're interested in building Android-based projects that take into consideration impulses from the brain, then you want to look at things like OpenBCI. OpenBCI has several libraries, both a Java and a Kotlin-based library, so that you can start building with that and building that into your Android applications and Android devices. There's also BrainFlow, but I don't believe that BrainFlow has a Kotlin library. And so now that we understand the value and the necessity to build for everyone and how many people we can be bringing into our product experiences, what kinds of things will we enable? We want to make sure that we are part of building a very accessible future. What kind of things would allow someone who has been left out of these experiences for the most part? What would allow them to take full part in your application and not just be a user and an actor in your system, but someone who is delighted and feels like this is tailor-made for them? So I want you to take all of this with you, and thank you so much for your time.